Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to our English news edition brought to you by Canal Algérie. First, to the headlines. The President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, received the personal representative of the President of the Transition in Mali. President Tebboune reiterates Algeria's permanent readiness to accompany the Malian people in the security and peace establishment in Mali. Prime Minister of Finance, Ayman bin Abdurrahman, hands over budget allocations to various ministerial departments for the financial year 2022. He calls on spending authorities to be rational and rigorous in the execution of the budget and not to resort to additional periods. The Chief of Staff of the National People's Army, Lieutenant General Saeed Shingariha, confirms the sensitivity of the mission entrusted to the High Military School in the special national and international circumstances that Algeria is witnessing. He also calls for facing all the challenges and preserve the country's security and stability. Good evening. Those were today's headlines. First in our news, the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, received on Thursday the Malian Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation Minister, Abdoulaye Diop, bearing a message from the President of the Transition in Mali. The minister was accompanied by a delegation of Malian officials. The meeting enabled the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, to be informed of the solutions proposed on the Malian scene with a view to overcoming the current crisis. The President of the Republic affirmed to the personal envoy of the President of the Transition in Mali the permanent availability of Algeria to accompany the Malian brothers in the restoration of security and peace and the support of democratic process. The audience took place in the presence of the Foreign Affairs and National Community Abroad Minister Ramtan Al-Amamra and the Presidency's Cabinet Director Abdelaziz Khalaf. Right after the audience, the Malian Foreign Minister made the following statement.
Porteur d'un message de son Excellence Assimi Goïta.
Carrying a message from His Excellency Assimi Goïta, President of the Transition and Head of State of Mali, to his brother, His Excellency Abdelmajid Tebboune, President of the People's Democratic Republic of Algeria. This message is part of the relations of solidarity, friendship, fraternity and good neighborliness that have always existed between Mali and Algeria. The message that I had the honor and pleasure of delivering to His Excellency President Tebboune focuses on the situation in Mali, particularly the progress and difficulties linked to the transition process that was marked recently by the holding in Mali of the National Conference on Reflection and Development. The National Conference on Refoundation, which enabled the Malians to talk to each other, to take ownership of their destiny, and to share their vision for Mali, and to set out the stages and prospects. Algeria, as a neighboring country, is more concerned by what is happening in Mali. And it is in this context that President Goïta asked us and the delegation accompanying me to come and share with his elder brother the message and recommendations that came out of his national conference, which is aimed at strengthening democracy in Mali, but also peace and stability. Algeria continues to play an essential role as a strategic partner and ally of Mali, but also as a country that stands by Mali in solidarity to accompany us in our efforts to bring peace and stability. I would like in particular to salute the role that Algeria is playing alongside us, notably through my brother Ramtan Al-Amamra, who has been an essential actor and architect of this process, which is our process for which we have really asked for Algeria's support. So I was saying that this meeting was really to share all these elements so that as neighbors, the Algerian president would be fully informed of what is going on and that he could also give us the necessary advice for the next steps, because the stability of Mali and also the stability of Algeria, and we are all together. Our peoples are experiencing the same difficulties and share the same hopes. So it is in the context that we have come to share this information and to ask that Mali, as a neighboring country of Algeria, continue to benefit from the support and solidarity. I think it is a tautology, an obviousness to ask for this, because on a daily basis Algeria is present at Mali's sides, often in a discreet manner, but it is always there. It is always present. So it is in this context that we came and we really listened listened frankly to the messages, the advice that the President gave us, and that we will also make it our duty to faithfully transmit to his brother, President Guetta. And we are certain that his wisdom, based on Algeria's experience, are elements that will also help Mali, the Malian people, the President, and the government as a whole, to be able to work together for a lasting peace and stability in our region, and also for the reinforcement of democracy in each of our countries.
L'Algérie est présente aux côtés du Mali, et souvent sans tambour battant, de façon discrète, mais elle est toujours là, elle est toujours présente.
Foreign Affairs and National Community Abroad Ramtala Mamra met on Thursday with his Malian counterpart Abdoulaye Diop on a visit to Algeria and bearer of a message to the President of the Republic Abdelmajid Tebboune from the President of the Transition in Mali Assimi Goïta. As part of its support to the implementation of process of peace and reconciliation agreement emanating from the Algiers process, the international mediation held on Wednesday a meeting via video conferencing chaired by Ambassador Boujem'a Delmi, Algeria's representative and head of the international mediation. On this occasion, the members of the international mediation reiterated the need to accelerate implementation of peace and reconciliation agreement, stressing the importance of this step, which contributes to the establishment of permanent stability in Mali, and it is an essential component of the overall project to rebuild the Malian state, underlining their determination to continue the support of the signatory parties to help remove obstacles that could prevent the rapid implementation of the agreement. The members of the international mediation also stressed the importance of all parties' involvement in this process without preconditions, underlining the need to complete disarmament, demobilization and reintegration without delay in accordance with the United Nations positions on this issue. The President of the Council of the Nation, or Upper House of Parliament, Salah Goujil, chaired on Thursday a plenary session devoted to oral questions for 5 different sectors. In a statement, Salah Goujil said that Algeria has accomplished advanced steps in terms of democratic practices and institutional building under the presidency of the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune.
It is a historic and decisive stage in our country, both regionally and internationally. It will determine its fate and contribute to the building of its democracy. An important step to make Algeria's voice heard in international forums. It is also important to hail the memory, which is the source that the Algerian people lived through to get its freedom and make its voice heard in all situations.
Still in the parliamentary activity and in his speech on the occasion of an information day for the presentation of the Guide to Economic Integration of Women, the President of the National People's Assembly, Ibrahim Boughali, emphasized the active role of women in the national production process. Boughali indicated that one could not speak of economic recovery without highlighting the active role of women in the national production process. She represents half of the society and holds half of its capacity. In a ceremony to hand over budget allocations to various ministerial departments for the financial year 2022 held on Thursday, Minister of Finance Ayman bin Abdurrahman made several announcements to the press, starting with the lifting of the freeze on all public and private projects, which creates wealth and job opportunities. He also added that the shortage of certain consumer products is mainly due to disruption in the distribution chain. More details with Manar Amari.
Minister of Finance Ayman bin Abdurrahman called on several ministerial departments to highlight that no extension of budget execution deadlines is now authorized.
Announcing these budget allocations in advance aims to allow authorizing officers to implement the budget over the entire year without resorting to additional periods, as was the case during the previous years. As part of the implementation of the new budget, we insist on the strict respect of the fundamental principles defined by the organic law relating to finance laws. Therefore, it is worth noting that the extension of the deadline for the payment of public expenditures and the deadlines for closing payment orders that were carried out this year in accordance with the decision taken on December 28, 2021, is an exception that will not be used in the future, since the اعتمادات المالية or financial credits are provided within the regulatory deadlines, enough to allow their execution during the financial year. Exceptions were allowed when the budget was set in April or May of the financial year. Now that the budget is set during the first week of January, it will be necessary to review the management tools implemented at the level of certain departments in order to carry out the budget from January to December.
While discussing the availability of foodstuffs, the Premier affirmed that the quantities produced by Algeria largely covered the needs of the citizens and linked these disruptions to a distribution problem, and reassured that it will return to normal as expected over the next few days.
Regarding cooking oil, national need is around 1,600 tons per day. In return, the production rate is 2,000 tons per day. That is to say that there is a surplus of 400 tons. The availability problem is therefore in the distribution chain. Things will take back their normal course in the upcoming days. I would like to point out that all over the world, consumer products have experienced a consequent increase in their prices, which is caused by the environmental conditions, particularly the increase in transportation costs. For example, the prices between China and Europe and China and Algeria have multiplied by 4, which had repercussions on production cuts, despite which the state continues its policy to support essential products which remain the same price.
Ayman bin Abdurrahman stated that the measures relating to the revision of the global income tax will also increase the wages of employees, which will in turn improve the purchasing power.
The revision of index points in the public service will come into force before the end of April 2022, in accordance with the instructions of President of the Republic Abdelmajid Tebboune as part of the comprehensive reform of the tax system during this year as well as the upcoming year, which will help support national development and the rate of the national integration.
Another announcement was made by Ayman bin Abdurrahman regarding the lifting of the freeze on all public and private projects in 2022 that create wealth and job opportunities, in addition to replacing imports with national products so as to not be impacted by the foreign market's convulsions.
In accordance with the provisions of the Presidential Decree of the 26th of September 2005, establishing the Superior War School, Chief of Staff of the National People's Army, Lieutenant General Saeed Chingariha, chaired on Thursday the proceedings of the 15th session of the Orientation Council of this prestigious school. In his speech, the Chief of Staff of the National People's Army underlined the interest attached by the High Command of the IMP to training in general and to the Superior School of War in particular. Karim Faz Zakari has more details.
In accordance with the provisions of the Presidential Decree of the 26th of September 2005 establishing the Superior War School, Lieutenant General Saeed Chingariha, Chief of Staff of the National People's Army, presided on Thursday the proceedings of the 15th session of the Orientation Council of this prestigious school. After the welcoming ceremony, the Lieutenant General started the meeting with a speech in which he emphasized the interest accorded by the High Command of the National People's Army to the training apparatus in general and at the Superior War School in particular with regard to the sensitivity of the mission with which it is invested. The High Command of the People's National Army, under the leadership of the President of the Republic, Supreme Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, Minister of National Defense, ensures that our training apparatus in general and the Superior War School in particular, in which it is invested with a highly vital mission, which consists of developing the capacities of senior officers, in particular in terms of the assimilation of strategic, technological, economic and human data relevant to the field of defense and national security, and to qualify them for senior positions in operational commands. The Lieutenant General, Chief of Staff of the National People's Army, emphasized the sensitivity of the mission that the High School of War shoulders. in the light of international events and the particular regional context that our country is currently going through, amid attempts led by the enemies of the peoples aiming to create hotbeds of tension in the sub-region. Indeed, this mission is as sensitive as it is vital for the National People's Army, given the international events and the particular regional context that we are going through in recent times, in the light of the maneuvers of the enemies of the peoples to create hotbeds of tension in the sub-region, aiming at the erosion of its states and the plundering of its natural resources, either through direct action or under the guise of non-governmental organizations and multinationals, which exert blackmail and pressure to interfere in the internal affairs of these states, in addition to the profound changes in the characteristics of modern wars, which are now carried out by proxy or by recourse to private military organizations, terrorists and subversive organizations, organized crime, and the use of drugs as a weapon. Moreover, it is called upon to manipulate public opinion through tendentious propaganda in order to undermine the morale of the populations, to sow discord, and to stir up conflicts between its ethnic, religious and tribal components, as well as the various forms of hybrid military operations aimed at the destruction of states and the overthrow of their regimes. The Lieutenant General gave instructions to the leaders of this school to the effect of deploying more efforts in order to adapt to all the mutations, to meet the challenges and to win the challenge of today's world, in this case safeguarding the sovereignty of our country and preserving its security and stability. It is therefore up to you, as managers of this superior school, to make greater efforts to adapt the teaching programs provided to the above developments and the great technological advances recorded in the various weapons and weapon systems. Indeed, by revolutionizing the methods of combat and the tactics of modern battle, these new systems have changed the course of wars. Hence, the need to meet the challenges and win the stakes of today's world, which consist in safeguarding the sovereignty of our country and preserving its security and stability. At the end, Saeed Shingriha followed an exhaustive presentation by the commander of the school on the assessment of the objectives achieved since the previous session of the Guidance Council and on the forecast plan for the next year 2022-2023, before asking closely about the various administrative and educational infrastructures.
According to a communique released by the Health Ministry on Thursday, 410 new confirmed cases of coronavirus, 257 recoveries and 8 deaths were recorded in the past 24 hours in Algeria. Our doctors and nurses are on the front line in the fight against the coronavirus pandemic. Equally, our researchers are exposed to the same danger, especially those at Pasteur Institute who are trying to better curb the virus. Let's find out more about their work with Manal Amari.
It is thanks to genome sequencing that the world was able to quickly identify the COVID-19, which allowed a rapid development of tests to diagnose it. The Pasteur Institute in Algeria is a reference structure in charge of screening and sequencing of the COVID-19. We were the only institution to receive samples at the start of the pandemic, but now there are over 130 laboratories which are approved by the Pasteur Institute that precisely carry out the PCR test. We still receive samples from other institutions to search for the Delta or Omicron variants. All positive tests go through the sequencing step, which is a mandatory procedure to determine their type. Our current strategy is to always look for the Delta variant because it is still dominant in our country and has almost 12 mutations. The Omicron variant that appeared recently has acquired up to 30 mutations. Even though it is not as aggressive as the Delta variant, its rate of contamination is much higher. According to experts, vaccination coverage remains very low, which opens the way for the emergence of a new, more contagious variant, hence the interest in intensifying genomic surveillance.
On Thursday, the Caliph General of the Tijaniya Order, Ali Bil-Arbi Tijani, was received in the Federal Republic of Nigeria by the Governor of Kano State, Dr. Abdullah Omar Vinduji, and Prince Aminu Adubairu. The visit came in response to an invitation from sheikhs and scholars of the Tijani order in the regions, which aims primarily at consolidating the bonds of love and ways of promoting the values of moderation and restraint in African societies. In Morocco, the wave of unrest continued to shake the grounds of the Makhzen regime. This time, it's the economic indicators which are in red. The economic analysts underlined a possible social explosion due to inequalities gap, which keeps widening day after day. The opposing parties of the Makhzen regime revealed that hundreds of billion dirhams are smuggled each year. Let's follow this report compiled by Karim Faz Zachary.
$0.57 billion. This is the deficit recorded by the trade balance of Morocco during the 11 months of 2021. Imports have increased by 24% compared to the end of November 2020 and are of the order of $51.27 billion. In its bulletin on the monthly indicators of foreign trade in November, the Office of Trade of the Makhzen attributes the increase in imports of goods to more than 24%. To the increase in purchases of all product groups, mainly finished consumer products, energy products, and semi-finished products. This dictator King Mohammed VI is the biggest money smuggler of the people's money. Then comes the royal family in this dictator kingdom. Then he is followed by the friends of the king, and at their head, the con man Munir al-Majidi, his scrivener. Then follows in the order the multi-billionaire Akhnouch, who took 17 billion dirhams when he was a premier and who modified the law so as not to be legally pursued. This came in the data collected by the office that the purchases of finished consumer products continued their rise to reach nearly 112 billion dirhams at the end of November 2021, against 85.5 billion dirhams at the end of November 2020. This represents an increase of more than 30.8%. The energy bill is also up by almost 50% due to the increase in supplies of gas, oil and fuel oil, due to the 39% increase in prices, combined with an increase in the quantities imported of over 9%. 300 billion dirhams were smuggled from Morocco during the last 10 years. This is foreign currency smuggled to secret offshore accounts. This is the money of the Moroccan people, all stolen. The Makhzen's balance of payment deficit also widened in the third quarter of 2021, with a 39% increase compared to the same period last year, reaching almost $2 billion today.
Still on the subject of Morocco, observers evoke a diplomatic crisis which is likely to strangle Rabat, a crisis due to an adventurous policy which has put European powers like Germany and Spain at their backs because of their support to self-determination of the Sahrawi people. Some former Moroccan diplomats speak of diplomacy which has reached its lowest point since independence. Ines Kellou has the details.
Morocco is in danger of sinking into isolation and hostility because of its aggressive approach to diplomacy, according to an analysis published in Foreign Policy, an American news magazine. The author of the analysis, a doctoral student in history at the University of California at Davis, points out that for the past year, headlines have pointed a picture of Moroccan diplomacy in decline, which has left the country, according to her, relatively isolated, even among its traditional allies. The analyst calls that in March 2021, Morocco suspended all contact with Germany because of its position in favor of self-determination for the Sahrawi people. And in May of the same year, it also recalled its ambassador from Spain and provoked the Ceuta migration crisis, which pushed the European Parliament to adopt a resolution concluding that Morocco was violating the UN Convention. In the same analysis, the author returned to the case of Pegasus spyware, used by agents of the Moroccan intelligence services to hack numerous personalities from several countries. By turning its back on the old continent, Morocco hoped to find in Washington a precious ally to establish its authority over the Western Sahara. And for this, it did not hesitate to make a pact with the devil throughout the normalization of its relations with the Zionist entity. The Makhzen regime was quick to eliminate the Biden administration, which rejects Trump's decision on the Western Sahara issue, and even limited military aid and funding to Morocco if the kingdom did not pledge to seek a mutual acceptable political situation to the conflict in Western Sahara. Moreover, according to Foreign Policy, former and current Moroccan diplomats agree that their country's diplomacy has reached its lowest point since independence. Some have even described it as erratic and mediocre.
The appeal trial of Moroccan journalists Omar Radi and Imad Titu, scheduled to take place on Thursday in Casablanca court, has been postponed to January 27th. Omar Radi, who is an investigative journalist and human rights activist, has published articles on the monopolization of public lands by speculators. He was also behind the outbreak of the corruption scandal known as quote-unquote servants of the state, which smeared the reputation of nearly 100 people, including high-ranking officials. On November 25, 2021, the human rights organization condemned the conditions in which Radi was sentenced by the court of Casablanca. 22 Palestinians were arrested and one was killed on Thursday morning by the army of the Zionist entity in the occupied West Bank, according to Palestinian medical and security sources. The deceased is a 21-year-old Bakir Hashash from the refugee camp of Balata. That was it for our news for today. Thank you for joining us. Goodbye.